Perfect. So thank y'all for joining us for Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And we are live and we're looking good. Everybody got their, ooh, your coffee looks so good.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Here, your tea. Let's have a little sip before we get started. Thank y'all for joining us. So in a second, we're going to be sharing the tea on how to start a nonprofit. But if you've never met me before, I am Sabrina. I'm the founder of Supporting World Hope, a nonprofit consulting company. I started after 25 years in the industry, and we have with us today Kim Fisher. She's a nonprofit strategist from Vision Catalyst. So before we get started, can you click the like or the heart button if you can hear me loud and clear? And let me know where you're watching from, even if you're watching in rebroadcast. You know, this is going to help us with our Facebook algorithms. So let's check and see who's checked in with us. And Kim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Absolutely. Great to be with you today, Sabrina. I'm enjoying my Earl Grey tea, which is my favorite.
Yes.
So as Sabrina said, I'm a nonprofit strategist, and I actually have over 30 years experience as a nonprofit executive. And ladies, I've done it all. And friends, I've done it all. I've been a director of development, director of marketing, director of training, and I've been a chief executive of an international organization called Arms of Love. And Arms of Love operates orphanages in Nicaragua and the Philippines. So I've had a really wonderful nonprofit adventure. I've also been a business coach. And of course, now I have my own nonprofit consulting company.
Perfect, perfect. Hi, Blanca. Thank you for joining us. I know you're ready. She says she's ready. You know,
right.
So thank you for joining us. So we have a couple of questions that I want to ask you. And some may even pop up that's not on the list just as we conversate, and people may have comments on questions as well. So I want to get us started. So I guess overall, since you are the how to start the nonprofit guru is what I call you, how do you start a nonprofit?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, Sabrina. Well, you know, it's obviously a nonprofit is, I love to help people create their own dreams, make their dreams happen. And so when you start a nonprofit, you are creating a corporation, essentially. So many people take a small business that they've already been doing and turn it into a corporation because they want to bring on a board, they want to do fundraising, they want to have some different things that they're able to do. So the first step of starting a nonprofit is you incorporate in the state that you are living in, and then you obtain your employer identification number from the IRS. And then, because you have to work under the state as your corporation who runs your business, and then the IRS is your tax exempt status. And then you have to create a board of directors, and that's a whole nother conversation in itself, and create a narrative for the IRS, and then a 3-year budget. And then once you file your nonprofit, you can file it online at irs.gov. Once you do that, then you have things like state tax exemption and statement of information and charitable organization registration and all kinds of other things that it takes to get legal and stay legal. So that's kind of just a general overview of how to do that.
Okay, I do have a question that's not on here, but I actually saw this in a group yesterday and you alluded to it. So let's say if you started your nonprofit in Virginia and then you relocate physically to another state,
yes.
Do you have to reincorporate at the state level in the new state?
Great question. There's 2 ways of doing that. Number one, you can have, so when you form a nonprofit, you have to have a registered agent in the state that you incorporate in. And that registered agent doesn't have any legal responsibility. They just say, yes, I'll accept mail at my office for you. That's the only thing that they have to do. So if somebody moves, like I have a client who I started their nonprofit here in Colorado, which is where I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and she moved to Missouri. And so what happens is I'm her registered agent in Colorado. So I just file all her paperwork for her and I'm her legal person. However, you can do something, interestingly enough, they call it a foreign corporation. You can actually incorporate in a different state and you file foreign incorporation papers if you want to do it that way. So there's a couple different ways that you can actually physically move about the country while you're running your nonprofit.
Wow, that's interesting. I just assumed that foreign was in another country or something.
Well,
I
I
don't
did
know what.
too. I find it, especially that I work so much in foreign organizations, it's funny to see that, because a foreign nonprofit means that it is incorporated in a different state than its original incorporation.
Wow. See, I learned something. So speaking of foreign, my next question is, so if you are in the US, but you want to start a nonprofit to help a program in another country, is the process the same, or are there different requirements?
So I'm assuming what you're asking is that you're looking to still have your administrative and fundraising arm in the US.
Yes.
So it is the same. The requirements are the same to do that. But yes, you need to have a board of directors in the US, just like you would normally. And you can actually have foreign individuals on your US board, though. That's okay to do that.
Okay.
However, you need to have at least one that's going to be in the US to manage paperwork and bank accounts and tax filings and all the things that you need to actually do for your business in the US. So, however, there's one challenge that you have. So when you're working with somebody, or if you're looking to start a nonprofit in a foreign country, you're going to have to complete a whole part of the 1023, which is the form the IRS requires, and it's for OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Assets and Control. And what it is an anti-terrorism statute that the IRS is looking to make sure that there's money not going to foreign countries for terrorism. So you have to basically do a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through to be able to operate in that country as far as where your money goes and all of that. So it's a little more complicated, but yes, you certainly, and many organizations do that. They have, they operate internationally, but they have their USs where they do their fundraising administration.
Okay, that makes sense. So thank you for that. Is there a place that you can find a list of all the nonprofits in the United States?
So where you would go to do that, so this is the place you can find a couple different things. If you Google IRS.gov, of course, that's the website. If you Google IRS.gov charity search, you will actually get to a section of the IRS website that allows you, first of all, to check your own organization, because you want to make sure your own organization is current, that you filed all your taxes, and the IRS has not shut you down. Unfortunately, if you don't file your taxes for 3 years, they will make you inactive. So that's the place you can always go. You can also pull off your tax returns, your charitable registration. Your IRS tax exempt letter is also on that website. You can find yourself on there. And within that too, you will also see a link that says you can verify all nonprofits in the country by going to that. However, it is a very long list, kind of an Excel document. It's not really easy to sort through. The other way to do that is to go to guidestar.com, guidestar.org, and that's usually where you can go and search for them. But finding one list of all the nonprofits besides the IRS website, which is very clunky, I have not found and I'd love to hear if someone has found that. I would love to know myself. So
okay. And you said it was IRS.gov charity site?
Charity search.
Charity. I'm writing that down because I didn't know that.
Yes, and then on it, you'll see a little button on there, search for a charity. And you can either do it by the EIN, by the name, by the state. You know, if you know the state, then you can just, narrow it down. Otherwise, you do it for the whole country.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. So, because I didn't know that one either. So, the next question is, welcome, Margaret. We're happy to see you. Margaret is my friend that is in Virginia, I believe, and is looking to incorporate. So she's joined us. So
wonderful, Margaret.
Yes.
Welcome.
So my next question is, are there rules per state different when filing your articles of incorporation, speaking of Virginia? And if so, if yes, how so? How are those rules different?
Great. Well, of course, as we know, the United States of America, we are 50 individual states that all have their own state laws for how they run business. So again, kind of what I alluded to earlier is that when you incorporate in a state, you are operating under the business laws of the state you're incorporating in. So every state, just like we know with all kinds of other things, has their own rules. They have their own forms. So you go to the Secretary of State for your state, and then you look for nonprofit incorporation. And yes, I've done probably 8 different states now that I've incorporated in, and they've all been 100% different from each other.
Perfect. So you have to go to, remind everybody again, where do they go?
They go to the Secretary of State for their own state. So if you're in Texas, Sabrina, Secretary of State, Texas. I'm in Colorado. I just Google that, and then it gets you to the correct one. Now, here's one thing I want to put a caveat out for everybody. It's making sure whenever you're accessing your own Secretary of State or the IRS that you're actually on the real website. What happens is sometimes you get on these other websites and people want to charge you for doing X, Y, Z, and you don't need to be paying for those things. You want to make sure you're actually on the real website, because I've even been tricked myself before, ending up somewhere that I didn't intend to be and then having to, re-find it again.
Okay, perfect. Good. That's a good rule to know. So, hey, if you're just joining us, welcome to our broadcast. Like Margaret just came on. She says Virginia in the house. We're currently talking about how to start a nonprofit, and we've covered, some very basics on how to start a nonprofit. We talked about if you are in another country and starting a nonprofit here in the U.S. We've also shared, how do you find a list of the charities the best way that we can. It's a little clunky, and how the state rules are a little bit different. So let us know where you are watching from, and click, a heart or a like button if you can hear us loud and clear. This is going to help us with our Facebook algorithms. And if you're watching in replay, just let us know that you're watching in replay. And if you have any questions, whether it's now or in a replay, put your questions, because we will be able to answer them throughout this process. And so we have with us the How to Start a Nonprofit Guru, Kim Fisher. So this is a good time to actually pick her brain if you have a question, have any doubts, anything like that. So we're going to continue with our process. And my next question is going to be, is the 1023 easy? Or the 1023? What is your preference and why?
Oh, that is a great question. So I also probably will note that I've done dozens of these with 100% success rate. So the IRS has their own little formula, and it's taken me a while to sort through it, but I have figured out what it is that they want, and I've done that very successfully, as I said, in many different states that I've operated in. So, and Sabrina, that is always a great challenge, because so the 1023, we call it the long form, and the 1023 easy is just that. It's an easy form. It's a shorter form. So the 1023 has more requirements. It requires, I mentioned the 4 steps in creating a nonprofit. Number 1, you do your incorporation in the state and get your EIN. Number 2, you're working on your board bylaws. You're recruiting your board, creating your bylaws, getting those signed. Number 3, you're creating your organization's narrative. The IRS wants to know what your programs are, how much time you're going to spend doing each one of them, who's doing them, that kind of a thing, and how much money you're going to spend on each one. And number 4, they want a budget. So those are kind of the main 4 components to creating the 1023. The 1023 costs $600 to file with the IRS. And if you're paying a consultant to do it for you, of course, the cost will also be higher, because there's a lot more work involved in that process. So for an example, when I work with my client, Sabrina, I coach them through the entire process of forming an organization. So when we do board bylaws, we do a training on how to form a board, what are in bylaws, how to run board meetings, all those kind of things are all kind of incorporated within that. So what I love about the 1023 long form, even though it's more expensive and more time consuming, is you have a more complete organization. And we all know that the more work we put in up front, the better off we are in the long run. And the nonprofit adventure is not an easy one. I've managed nonprofit organizations and work with a lot of startups, and there's a lot of things that have to be in place and done well to be successful. The 1023 EZ is a very short online form. It's only, the 1023 long form is, I think, 14 pages. The 1023 EZ is 2 pages, or maybe 3. And it costs $275 to file it. They do not require articles of incorporation to be uploaded, nor do they require bylaws to be uploaded. So an organization can very easily get on there, start their 1023 EZ with really not having the building blocks in place to do an organization. So with all that being said, as a professional and what I know it takes to run an organization and be successful, I am a big, big fan of the 1023. But the 1023 is difficult to do on your own. The 1023 EZ people can do on their own. But as I've already stated, I feel like you don't end up with a full and complete organization when you're done.
Got it. Got it. And that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
So we have a couple questions here, and I usually save the questions for last, but I think I'm going to go ahead and ask them
Yes.
before I get to my questions. So Margaret says, how do you decide whether to incorporate on your own or find an umbrella organization to cover you, or to join the core foundation, I believe, foundation? And she says the core foundation, they take care of all the legal and business paperwork, but then they restrict some aspects.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is you're talking about fiscal sponsorship. And that's a great way to start an organization, especially if you don't really want to run all the administrative aspects of fundraising, taxes, receiving your donors. That can be a really great option for a lot of people. But yeah, so what you do is you operate under the program of another organization. So some of the downsides to that is that so the upside again is the fact that you are not handling all of the administrative duties of the organization. The downside is the fact that you're not in control of your own donors. So if your donors are giving to an organization, those donors are technically belonging to that organization. And so you're not having donor records, you're not receiving your own donors legally. The organization that you're under the fiscal sponsorship of is doing that. So again, there's pros and cons to both, but what I will tell you, again, I had a client here in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I work, and I was doing a board training for them. And it turns out that they'd become a fiscal sponsor under a program in town here. Things went bad. They separated and became their own nonprofit. And unfortunately, guess what? That nonprofit did not want to give over the donor lists. So we all know that things happen. We don't want to think that that will, especially in the nonprofit world where we're out to help others. But we all know that relationships can go difficult. And part of my job, Sabrina, really is to talk about, it's like insurance. No one wants to buy insurance, but we all buy it for the reasons why we know we need to have it. So there's certain things when you form your nonprofit with your bylaws and other things that are good practices, because things do happen.
Yeah.
So again, those are kind of pros and cons of both sides.
So that makes perfect sense to me. I have one more question here. It says, "Hey Samantha," she's just joined us a little bit earlier. She says, "I am new here, but really curious. If someone starts a nonprofit, can you quit your job and still have an income? Or is a nonprofit something you start apart from your day job?"
Ah, that is another wonderful question. So I guess what I would say is I see people that do both things. I would say 100%, or I would say 99.9% of the nonprofits that I form for people, the people desire to work full-time in their own organization and be paid as an executive director / president, whatever they want to call themselves within that. So that's the thing. But the challenge is, of course, is raising the money to be able to do that. You need to raise the money for your own salary and for the expenses of the organization for the program that you need to run. So I would say most of the people that I work with do work a day job until they can get their organization to a point where the organization is able to support a full-time salary. But that is a great question, because often people will come and they feel like a nonprofit means they don't get paid. And that is exactly the opposite, is because nonprofits have paid staff and you need to pay your staff well. That's one of my hot buttons, having been a chief executive. Yes, exactly. Having been a nonprofit director and worked in this world for so many years is, sorry, you're gonna have me get me on a soapbox here.
Yeah.
But working for a nonprofit does not mean that you live in poverty.
Exactly.
It does not mean you don't have good benefits. It doesn't mean you don't have a good computer. So sorry, I can go off on that one for a while there.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. We both have the same soapbox issue.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So going back with that is the fact that yes, you can, once you raise the money that you need, or you have good investors, then yes, you certainly can quit your day job, work full-time in your organization, and pursue your own dream full-time.
Good. Yeah, I'm so happy that you said that, because yes, it's a soapbox issue for me. Just because you're a nonprofit does not mean that you get paid. I have a whole rant about that somewhere on the video, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So thank you, Ann, for joining us, and Homer Gonzalez. So we're going to get back to the questions that I have here, and hopefully they make sense, because I did kind of switch it up just a little bit.
That's okay.
So what does one need to have in place prior to filing for a nonprofit with the IRS?
Okay. So I think it kind of goes back to what I talked about before. The first step I do with my clients is we determine their name. So we get their articles of incorporation filed and the EIN. Those are required by the IRS, creating bylaws. And as I said, the budget and a basic understanding of what your programs are going to be. That's what the 1023 will actually require you to complete as you go online to do it. So yes, and you do, it used to be that you filed the 1023 by mail. I used to have to create a whole stack of paperwork for my clients. And now you do it online, which makes it much easier, much more quick. But yes, so
with the and this was not there, but with COVID happening and the pandemic happening, have you seen a extension in the turnaround for your IRS approval for 501?
So interestingly enough, when the IRS changed to online at the beginning of this year, and it used to take, the longest one I ever had was 8 months.
Ooh.
I had them as short as 2 months, you know, so you never really exactly know what happens when you get in the IRS system, as we all know. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I started moving online with my applications was March, which was right when COVID hit. And I've seen since they've gone online that the responsiveness has been faster as far as approval time goes. So for me, it's kind of hard to sort that out because it all happened right at the same time. Okay. But I know, of course, like anywhere, the IRS has less employees working. And I think everything's a little more complicated right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So get into some little questions more around your experience in working outside the U.S. as opposed to your nonprofit creation. Again, I know that you worked for nonprofits outside of the U.S. Mm-hmm. How was that experience? I'm always interested to know.
Yes. Sabrina, I love the nations. I love the nations. I love peoples. I love culture. I love stories. So I've been to Siberia. I've been to a small hut in Senegal. I've been to, I guess, 25 countries. I've worked in probably 6 of them. And so I love that aspect of it. At the same time, depending on the country and the way the country itself is structured, it can be very challenging because for me, I did business in these countries. So I had to interact with governments. I had to form boards. In fact, you asked me earlier about forming an organization that operates internationally, but does their fundraising and administration in the US. Many, many countries do require you to have your own NGO in that country and your own board of directors. It all just depends. And every country, of course, has its own laws around that. So anyway, what I would say is working within the governments of developing countries has been extremely challenging. Learning curve kind of like this. If you think a board in the US is challenging, imagine trying to form a board in Nicaragua. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Nicaragua, in fact, has been in the Civil War for the last 2 years. So, which is very sad. I have many people that I know and love that have been involved in things with that. But anyway, that's just an example. When you have some instability, if you're working in countries that have instability, you're going to be operating in those government structures.
Yeah.
And so, an example, one more thing, employee laws. Employment laws are so different in other parts of the world. So you have to learn employment laws that are very different than how you expect you're going to do business in the US. So you have to have a lot of patience and a lot of love and a lot of passion for what you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how is fundraising impacted? What's the effect that will have on nonprofit fundraising when you're operating in another country?
Yeah. And I found this struggle, and I'm sure many of our listeners today have had this too, is that if I'm looking to raise a sponsorship for a child to go to school in Nicaragua, often the question I would get is, but we have so many opportunities, so many needs in our own country, why would we go outside? So I think that there is a special person who has a desire to impact their world globally. And that doesn't mean that anyone is wrong or anything like that. It's just there's different of us have our own passions in the world, which is why there's so many nonprofits and so many businesses and so many things that we get to operate in as individuals. So I would say that I've encountered many, many people who have a love for the nations and do want to make an impact around the world. And I think one of the things, and this is always kind of a tricky thing to say here, so I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes, is that the US has so many opportunities. And even though I know that there are definitely challenges that people face, working internationally, the challenges are so much greater.
Mhm.
For an example, I'm just going to share a story if I could.
Mhm.
In Nicaragua, for example, you have to have a special school uniform. You have to have these special black shoes to wear. And if you can't afford those, then you can't go to school. School also isn't free. People think school is free internationally. It really is not. Our schools are free, basically, for especially in younger years. Many parts of the world, they're not free. They have to pay tuition. So I will just share as an example. I know in Nicaragua, many girls get into prostitution. Guess why? Because they need money to buy a school uniform.
Wow.
And then their siblings need money to buy a school uniform, and they do that, and so on. So just sharing, Sabrina, those are the stories that I will share with people to kind of bring them into an understanding of the global needs. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's such a unique experience that you have. I just wanted to make sure that we hit on it just a little bit, because I don't have that experience, and a lot of people don't have that experience. And so thank you for sharing that. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions related to our topic of how to start a nonprofit. And let's see. Yes, Samantha says, what factors would keep you from being approved? So what factors would keep your 1023 from being approved by the IRS?
That's great. So I would say, first of all, not having the requirements of the IRS, not filling out the paperwork correctly. But what I have found is when I have filed paperwork and the IRS has had questions, that they come back and they ask you questions. So they don't, I've done dozens of them, never had one rejected. So I had one client though that I had to answer questions 3 times with the IRS, but they kept coming back with questions. So their intent is to approve you, which I think is really positive. So I think that the reasons why they wouldn't approve you is if you did not have a compelling nonprofit purpose, meaning the fact that your nonprofit was clearly for personal gain and not for a community purpose. If you didn't have a board set up, if you didn't have your budget done correctly, if you hadn't thought through all the things you needed to do. But as far as the bigger picture, which I think is probably what you're asking, I think that, again, having a community focus, you're about changing something and creating something outside of yourself to impact the greater world. That's going to be a very, very compelling nonprofit purpose.
Perfect. I'm going to check and see if there's any more questions. And Margaret says thank you, because this is a lot of information, and
Yeah.
I know what she's deciding to do or not do. I don't see any more questions. I do want to encourage you that if you have a question, go ahead and type it in, because like I said, we have the guru here around how to start a nonprofit. But I'm going to say this. One of the questions I get most asked about is around fundraising. And Sabrina, can you help with fundraising? And my answer is always yes. And the next steps, you can just visit my website at supportingworldhope.com to check out my services. I will say that I have a 24-hour sale on my Jumpstart Your Nonprofit, which ends tonight. And we're going to be we're going to be talking about we're going to go over fundraising plans, how to engage your board, how to write your nonprofit story, how to do your case for support. So go in and check that out. Even if you're watching a rebroadcast and you have a question, please put it in the comments, because Kim has agreed to answer those if I send those to her. Because like I said, she is very, very knowledgeable on how to start a nonprofit. So with that, Kim, I don't see any more questions, because I kind of took them out of order and got them answered as we were going along. But what I would like to do, Kim, is just give you the opportunity to let people know how they can contact you, especially, and I just got another question in. Do nonprofits work with governments or schools to help implement the changes they are working for? And if they do, is it an easy process?
There we go. Well, I think I'd have to say working with the government is never an easy process. So anyway, so I think, there are nonprofits out there that do that. And so that has to do with getting contracts. And so that's not an area that I personally work in. I don't, getting government contracts, school contracts are not easy. You usually need to have connections and contacts to get into those kind of spaces. But yes, there are nonprofits that do work alongside them.
Okay,
I know
perfect.
that.
So I do have a little bit of background in that, Samantha. So yes, as far as government, my nonprofit actually very unique that I came from. We were considered an agent of the city and had an agreement in place. So like the economic development arm, economic development council was the economic arm. Our organization was considered the youth development arm. And so we had an agreement in place with the city, and they gave us $482,000 from their operating line item. So we didn't have to apply for this. It was just something in there. And we also had a contract with the school district. And it was a contract. Well, actually, it was a grant, and then we were a subcontractor. And we received, I think, like $132,000 each year. So yes, it's very possible. But like Kim said, it takes time. You got to develop those relationships. You gotta have to politic, for lack of a better word.
True.
You know, you have to get to know your city council. You have to get to know your school board members. You have to invite them on tours of your organization, really educate them on what your organization is about. It doesn't happen overnight. Let me just say, our organization was around 50 years. So it took us some time to build those, but once you get there, it can be done. And exactly right, it's contracts. But if you can get into their general line item budget, that's when you know you've hit gold. You know, you don't have to apply for it. They just, you know, you're in there and that's it. So I don't see any more questions outside of that. So Kim, tell us how we can get in contact with you if you're interested in starting a nonprofit.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sabrina. And I offer a 30-minute complimentary consultation discovery call to see if forming a nonprofit is right for you. And one of the big questions people come and ask me is, there's 4 reasons why people form a nonprofit. They want to generate donations. They want to bring in a team of people to help them with their project so that it continues and grows. They want it to continue apart from them, meaning that if people start a project and they leave, the organization continues without them. And also they want to separate their personal liability from whatever project that they're working on. Those are the 4 main reasons why people start nonprofits. So what I do when I chat with people is talk through, what is it you're dreaming about? What are you thinking about? And whether that's a good next step for you to do. So my website, my company name, as you said, is Vision Catalyst. My website is visioncatalyst.org. And my email address is kim@visioncatalyst.org. You can go to my website. There's a button there where you can schedule an appointment with me. Make sure you let me know where we connected, and I'd love to chat with you.
Perfect. And I really encourage y'all to chat with her, especially those that are in the discovery. I call it the discovery phase. You know, they're looking in, and they're going to their state and they're going, oh, that's a lot. You know, I don't know if I can do that. You know, just save yourself some time and call Kim, get on her free consultation and decide if that is the road you want to go down, and she can really help you. And you know, I hear, and I'm going to say this, I hear a lot of people want to do the 1023 easy, but what she's offering is the infrastructure of what you need for your nonprofit. So yeah, you can do the easy, but then you won't know, you know, what to do with your board. You won't know what to do with your, you know, fundraising plan, how to start a budget, you know, because I see all of these questions in groups and I'm thinking, they probably did the 1023 easy because if they did the other ones, they would know what their budget would be, right? And they would know what to do with their board. But, you know, we live and we learn. And sometimes it's about finances, but who knows what the decision is. But I always say in the long run, really, you save yourself some time by going to someone that knows what they're doing. So before we end, I would like to say we got a lot of feedback on this one, Kim. So thank you so much for being here. What I want to know is there a topic that you want to hear about in sipping tea. And if there is a topic you want to hear about, you know what, just let me know in this on my Facebook page here. You can even write it in the comments as you're here, to let me know, because we will go out and we will find someone that specializes in that topic. And I would like for you to tap the live button so you can know the next time that we go live. And you can also see other live videos by visiting my website, www.supportingworldhope.com. And this video will also be uploaded to the website as well. And this is what I'm going to do. I am going to leave you with this. Your mission matters and deserves to be highlighted in the community. Your mission matters and can be an inspiration to those who need it the most. Your mission matters and deserves to be funded to its fullest capacity. And that's Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And we will see you the next time. Thank you so much.